This story is titled, Sister Refused Help During My Struggles When I Was Dead Broke. Now I'm rich and she's on her knees begging for her kids' treatment. Hey everyone, I'm 24 years old and living in Phoenix with a complicated family situation that recently came to a head. My sister, who is 30, and I have never been close. In fact, we've been distant for as long as I can remember. Growing up, we were complete opposites in almost every way possible. She was the overachiever type that parents dream about, captain of 3 different sports teams, and the teacher's pet in every class. Meanwhile, I was labeled the problem child, who constantly received lectures from our parents about how I needed to apply myself more and be more like my sister. Those comparisons followed me throughout my childhood and teenage years, creating a rift between us that never really healed. Even as adults, we've remained worlds apart. She's all about strict schedules and perfect planning, while I'm more laid back, just going with the flow and trying to figure life out day by day. Despite our differences, things were manageable between us. We kept our distance but maintained at least a superficial relationship during family gatherings and holidays. That all changed about 18 months ago when my whole life turned upside down. I had been working as a marketing specialist at this up-and-coming company. Things seemed stable, and I was building a decent career for myself. Until suddenly, they weren't stable at all. The company shut down without any warning. There was no severance, no nothing. One day I was at my desk planning the next month's expenses, and the next day my manager came in looking like death with bad news written all over his face. Sorry, but we're closing immediately, he told us, his voice flat with resignation. You'll get your final check in 2 weeks. Just like that, everything I'd built came crashing down around me. I had no backup plan, barely any savings, and a stack of bills that was already piling up. Rent was breathing down my neck, and I could practically feel the walls closing in around me. I couldn't sleep for days as my brain ran in constant panic mode, trying to figure out a solution that didn't seem to exist. I tried everything I could think of to find a solution to my financial crisis. I called every temp agency in the city, reached out to old coworkers, and even considered selling my laptop, which I desperately needed for job hunting. Nothing was working out. With only 2 weeks until rent was due, I was rapidly running out of options. That's when I realized I had to do the one thing I really didn't want to do: ask my sister for help. Let me explain about my sister. She's not exactly mean, but she's rigid as hell. Everything in her life is black and white, right and wrong, her way or the highway. She's been like this since we were kids. If I didn't do things exactly her way, whether it was cleaning our shared room or picking classes in high school, she'd completely lose it. So asking her for help felt like swallowing broken glass, but I had no choice. I couldn't ask our parents either. My dad's on disability, and my mom's still paying off their mortgage. If I asked them for help, they'd probably dip into their retirement savings, and that was the last thing I wanted. It's probably why they've been pushing me to figure things out on my own instead of helping directly. So there I was, staring at my phone for hours, sitting on my beaten-up couch. My pride was screaming at me not to call, but my fear of homelessness was screaming louder. I finally did it. I called her. She answered like I was interrupting something important, her tone clipped and impatient from the start. I tried to keep it together, but as soon as I started explaining my situation, I lost it completely. I broke into full-on ugly crying, telling her everything about losing my job and being scared. I just needed $1,000 for rent until I could figure things out. Her response? Just no. Flat and cold, without a moment's hesitation. Then she started lecturing me about how she doesn't believe in lending money to family because it always ruins relationships. She said it wasn't personal, just her policy, like she was some kind of bank manager rejecting a loan application. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I wasn't asking for a handout, just a loan until I got back on my feet. But she cut me off cold. I'm sorry, but I can't help you, she said, and then hung up. Just like that. I sat there in complete shock, my phone still in my hand. I knew we weren't close, but this was next level cold. She didn't even offer to help in another way. There was no, let me talk to my husband, or maybe I can help with groceries, or I'll help you job hunt. Nothing. It was like she slammed a door in my face, leaving me standing in the rain. I couldn't stop crying that night. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about her not giving a single shit about her sobbing sister who was desperate for help. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I'd said something wrong or somehow offended her. But the truth hit harder than a brick. She just didn't care. That realization hurt worse than losing my job. She was my sister, my blood, and in my moment of need, she turned her back on me. I never expected her to be that cold. I was a complete mess after that phone call. The weight of her no wasn't just about money. It was like being smacked in the face with the reality of our relationship, or lack of one. Who does that to their own sister? I wasn't some distant cousin she barely knew. I was her literal sister. I wasn't asking for a shopping spree. I was asking for a lifeline. But there was no time for self-pity. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and I couldn't afford to lose my apartment. I woke up the next morning with puffy eyes from crying and a massive headache pounding away. I told myself, if she won't help, screw it. I'll figure this out on my own. The first thing I did was make a list of everything I could possibly sell. It was depressing how little I had that was worth anything. I started with my old gaming setup, a decent pair of noise-canceling headphones, and anything extra I could find. I put it all online and sold most of it within a day. I almost pawned my laptop too, but needed it for job hunting. Every sale felt like giving up a piece of my dignity, but what choice did I have? It wasn't just the selling part that hurt. It was the reminder of how precarious everything was. While packing up my console, I kept thinking about my sister's perfect life, her fancy house in the nice part of town, her weekly yoga classes, her husband's shiny new SUV. She had everything, while I was counting pennies just to keep a roof over my head. Life isn't fair, and that lesson hit hard. I decided to swallow my pride again and reach out to some friends. That was even harder than calling my sister, because borrowing from friends creates a special kind of awkward situation. But you know what? They actually came through. Not with huge amounts, but enough to keep my landlord off my back for another couple of weeks. One friend even offered their couch if things got really bad. That gesture alone made me cry. The contrast between my friend's kindness and my sister's coldness was overwhelming. I still didn't want to be a burden, so I started applying for literally every job I could find. Temp work, retail, even positions completely outside my field. I didn't care about titles or salaries anymore. I just needed something, anything to keep me afloat. For weeks, it was the same cycle. Wake up, send resumes, check job boards, attend interviews, and get those same canned rejections. Soul-crushing doesn't even begin to describe it, but I kept pushing forward. Meanwhile, my sister didn't check in on me. Not once. There was no, "How are you holding up?" or "Did you figure something out?" Just complete radio silence. And honestly, that hurt even more. I wasn't expecting her to change her mind, but a text to see if I was okay? Would that have killed her? One moment really sticks in my memory. I was taking out the trash one evening when I bumped into my neighbor, a sweet older lady from 2 doors down. She could tell something was off with me. I must have looked as stressed as I felt. She stopped me right there in the hallway and said, "You've got a lot on your shoulders, don't you?" Before I knew it, I was spilling my guts to her, tears and everything. She didn't offer money, but she listened. It was the first time someone actually seemed to care about what I was going through, and that meant more than I can express. I managed to scrape by that month, but barely. I kept selling whatever I could find and started picking up random gigs. Walking dogs, building IKEA furniture for people, anything to make a buck. It wasn't glamorous work by any means, but it kept me in my apartment, and that's all that mattered to me at that point. Looking back at those weeks, they were some of the hardest in my life, but I learned something important. When push comes to shove, I can survive on my own. The thing is, though, survival came at a cost. My trust in my sister? Completely gone. Before all this happened, I had this naive hope that despite our differences, we'd always be there for each other in the big moments. But that phone call shattered everything. It wasn't just about money. It was what it represented. Her refusal wasn't just about rent. It was refusing to stand by me when I needed her most. For weeks, I kept replaying that conversation, trying to make sense of it. I wondered if I caught her on a bad day, or if maybe she had her own problems that I didn't know about. But then I would remember how cold she sounded, how quick she was to shut me down, and I'd get angry all over again. It was like a cycle of hurt and frustration that I couldn't escape. The continued silence from her side made it worse. Even if she wouldn't lend me money, she could have checked in. A simple, "Hey, how's everything going?" would have meant the world. But no, she was too busy with her perfect life to spare a thought for her struggling sister. The more I thought about it, the more resentful I became. I didn't tell anyone else in the family about what happened. Part of me didn't want the drama, and another part felt embarrassed about the whole situation. What would they even say? That I should have planned better? That I should have expected this from her? It seemed easier to just keep it to myself and focus on moving forward. And I did move forward. 2 years later, my life looks completely different. After grinding at several temp jobs, I finally landed something stable with a decent salary. It's nothing fancy, but it pays the bills and gives me room to breathe. Most importantly, it helped me rebuild my life after hitting rock bottom. I barely heard from my sister during that time, and honestly, I preferred it that way. It's not like we had weekly catch-ups before all this happened. After what happened, even the thought of talking to her felt like reopening a wound. I knew I should have been over it by then, but the resentment lingered. How do you forget something like that? Sure, I was doing better now, but I couldn't erase the fact that when I needed her most, she slammed the door in my face. So imagine my surprise when my phone lit up one evening with her name on the screen. My first thought was that it was a mistake. She never calls, ever. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won out. The moment I said hello, I knew something was wrong. She was crying. Not the delicate movie kind, but full-on sobbing. It took her a minute to form words, and when she did, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her husband had lost his job months ago, and they were struggling financially. On top of that, her 3-year-old daughter, my niece, needed some medical treatment that their insurance wouldn't cover up front. They needed $1,500, and she was asking me for help. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. This was the same sister who turned me away when I needed $1,000 to avoid losing my apartment. The same one who lectured me about not lending money to family. And now she was asking me to bail her out. She must have sensed my hesitation because she quickly launched into this speech about how dire the situation was. "It's for my daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "She's just a baby. We don't have anyone else to turn to." She was begging me through the phone. "Please, I'll pay you back as soon as we get reimbursed, I swear." Here's the thing, though. I love my niece. She's adorable, sweet, and completely innocent in all of this. But as much as I care about her, I couldn't ignore the irony of the situation. 2 years ago, I was the one on that other end, desperate and scared, and my sister shut me down without a second thought. Now here she was, expecting me to swoop in and save the day. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." There was only silence on the other end. I could almost hear her taking a breath, gearing up for what was coming. Then, like a switch had been flipped, she exploded. "How could you do this?" she screamed. "This isn't about me. This is about my daughter, your niece. How can you punish an innocent child just to get back at me? What kind of person does that?" I had to hold the phone away from my ear, completely stunned by her reaction. She continued her tirade. "You're petty, vindictive, selfish. That's what you are. Selfish." "Calm down," I said. "You're not being fair right now. I'm not punishing anyone, least of all my niece. But I'm not going to hand over money when you haven't even been honest with me." "Honest with you?" she snapped. "What the hell does that even mean? You think I'm lying about my daughter's health now? God, you've really sunk low." "I didn't say that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you weren't upfront about the money. You said it was all for medical bills, but I found out a big chunk is for other expenses. That's not okay, and you know it." She didn't even acknowledge what I said. Instead, she doubled down harder. "You have no idea what it's like to be in my position. My husband's out of work. We're drowning in bills. I'm doing everything I can to keep this family afloat. But you're just sitting there on your high horse, judging me like you're so much better." I told her straight up. "This isn't about me being better or worse. This is about boundaries. 2 years ago, I was in a terrible spot. I came to you for help and you said no. Fine, that was your choice. But now you're in a similar situation, and you expect me to just forget all that and bail you out. Do you see how unfair that is? Don't you dare compare this to what happened 2 years ago?" She was practically shouting now. "You needed money for rent. That's not the same as needing money for my child's health. You're a grown adult. You could have figured it out on your own." "And I did," I shot back. "I figured it out on my own because I had no other choice. And guess what? You have other choices too. Sell some stuff, borrow smaller amounts from other people, figure out a payment plan. But don't act like I'm the bad guy for not swooping in to fix everything." "Oh, so now you're going to lecture me?" Her voice was dripping with sarcasm. "That's rich coming from someone who's always been a screw-up. You're just jealous that I've done better for myself. And now you're using this as some sick way to get back at me." "Jealous of you?" I repeated. and I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. You think this is about jealousy? No, babe. This is about you showing your true colors. You set the rules for our relationship when you refused to help me. I'm just playing by those same rules now. If you don't like it, maybe you should have thought about that before. She came back with one last jab. You're heartless. Completely heartless. I hope you can live with yourself knowing you're letting your niece suffer because of your stupid grudge. She scoffed loudly, then hung up. I sat there for a moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. Part of me wanted to cry, while another part felt oddly relieved. For the first time ever, I'd stood my ground against her. Even though it was messy and painful, I knew it was the right thing to do. But here's the thing. I wasn't being petty, and I wasn't even trying to get revenge. I was just holding her to her own standard. She made it clear years ago that we weren't the kind of family that helped each other out financially. She set those rules, and now she was mad that I was following them. That conversation blew up everything. Within hours, my mom was calling, demanding to know what happened. My sister had gone straight to our parents, painting me as some heartless monster who was letting my niece suffer out of spite. Mom begged me to reconsider. It's not about your sister, she pleaded. It's about your niece. Even my dad called, which was unusual since he typically stays out of our drama. He said he was disappointed in me. It was overwhelming, feeling like everyone was ganging up on me and no one cared about my side of the story. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew that standing my ground was right. If I gave in now, what message would that send? That she could treat me however she wanted and I'd still come running when she needed me? No thanks. Still, it wasn't an easy decision. I kept thinking about my niece. None of this was her fault. Part of me wanted to help, but every time I considered it, I would hear my sister's words from 2 years ago echoing in my head. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Over the next few days, the family tension got worse. My parents kept calling, trying to guilt trip me. My sister sent angry texts accusing me of being cruel and ungrateful. At one point, she tried to loop in our extended family to get them to gang up on me. Thankfully, they stayed out of it. Meanwhile, something felt off about the whole situation. I couldn't shake this feeling that there was more to the story than my sister was letting on. I decided to do some digging and reached out to a mutual friend who was closer to my sister. I asked what they knew about the situation, and that's when the truth came out. Turns out, my niece's medical situation wasn't as dire as my sister had claimed. The treatment was more nice to have than life or death. And that $1,500? It wasn't just for medical bills. She was planning to use it for overdue bills and other expenses. I asked our friend if my sister had mentioned any serious medical issues or something urgent with my niece. The friend seemed genuinely confused and said my sister hadn't mentioned any medical problems at all. The last they'd heard from her were just the usual complaints about money being tight and stress from her husband's unemployment. There was no indication of anything urgent or life-threatening with my niece. When I heard that, any lingering guilt disappeared. It wasn't just that she'd asked for help. She'd straight up lied and used her own child to manipulate me, to tug at my heartstrings. That was something I could never forgive. So yeah, the tables had turned, but I wasn't about to play by her twisted rules. If she wanted to fix her problems, she'd have to do it without me. But my family wasn't letting this go. First, there were my parents. My mom called at least 3 times a day, each time with a different angle to guilt trip me. One rant was about turning my back on family, while another focused entirely on my niece. You might not care about your sister, she said during one call, but what about that sweet little girl? What has she ever done to you? My dad, who normally avoided drama, called once to tell me I was being cold and selfish. That was hard to hear, even though I knew they didn't have the full story. I tried explaining my side, telling my mom exactly what my sister had said 2 years ago when I needed help. I reminded her how I had scraped by on my own without turning to family for more than emotional support. But my mom wasn't having it. That was different, she insisted. You didn't have a child to think about. It didn't seem to matter to her that I'd been just as desperate, just as scared. To her, the only thing that mattered was that my niece supposedly needed help, and I wasn't giving it. Then came the text from my sister. She was blowing up my phone with paragraph after paragraph of accusations and insults. One message would be begging me to reconsider, and the next would be calling me names. The emotional whiplash was real. My favorite text, if you can even call it that, was this 6-part rant about how I was lucky to be in a position to help and how I didn't understand what it was like to struggle. That one nearly made me throw my phone across the room. I really wanted to reply, Oh, I don't know what it's like to struggle. Did you forget about 2 years ago when I was crying to you about losing my apartment? But I didn't. I knew it wouldn't get through to her. And honestly, I didn't want to waste the energy. At one point, she tried to drag our extended family into the mess. I woke up one morning to a flurry of texts from cousins, aunts, and even a couple of family friends, all saying the same thing. How could you let your niece suffer? Most didn't even know the full story. They just heard her version, which made me sound like the villain of the century. I ended up muting half of them just to get a break from the constant notifications. What really pushed me over the edge, though, was when my sister decided to involve our parents even more. She showed up at their house one afternoon with my niece in tow, using her as a prop in this twisted guilt campaign. My mom called me later that day. "Your niece was here today," she said, like I didn't know where this was going. "She doesn't understand why her auntie won't help her mommy." I wanted to scream. It wasn't my niece's fault, I knew that. But the fact that my sister was willing to use her own child as a weapon in this fight made my blood boil. It was manipulative, plain and simple, and only made me more determined to stand my ground. Still, the guilt wasn't easy to shake. Every time I thought about my niece, I felt this ache in my chest. She was just a kid, completely innocent in all of this. She didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of our family drama. Eventually, I decided I needed to take control of the narrative. I couldn't keep letting my sister twist the story to make me look bad. We have this big family group chat where we all act nice and throw fake compliments around. You know the type. Here's what I wrote in the group chat. "Hi, everyone. I want to clear the air about what's been going on because there's been some misunderstanding. 2 years ago, I was in a tough spot. I reached out to my sister for help because I was about to lose my apartment. I asked to borrow $1,000 and she said no. That was her choice and I respected that, even though it hurt. Well, now my sister has asked me for $1,500. At first, I thought it was for my niece's medical bills, but I found out later that wasn't the whole truth. A large portion of the money was for other expenses. I'm not sharing this to shame anyone, just to explain why I made the decision I did. I don't believe in being manipulated, and I don't think it's fair to twist the story to make me look like the villain. I love my niece and would never want her to suffer. But this situation isn't as black and white as it's been made out to be. I'm happy to help directly with my niece's medical bills if that's truly needed, but I won't hand over cash without transparency. I hope you can all understand where I'm coming from." I sent it and immediately muted the chat. I couldn't handle the anxiety of waiting for replies, so I went for a walk to clear my head. When I got back, there were over 50 messages waiting, most from my sister, who had clearly lost it. I didn't want to accuse her of lying to everyone outright, but I needed to show my parents the truth. They wouldn't believe me if I just accused her of lying. They'd need proof. The next day, I made a decision to call the hospital and ask about payment options for the treatment my sister claimed was urgent. They were polite but firm. No record of any patient with your niece's name registered for treatment. So I gathered everything to forward to my parents. It was the only way to make them see that my sister had fabricated the entire situation. My mom sounded relieved when I told her, but my dad was livid. "Why didn't she tell us any of this?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. My sister's actions made no sense. Was it pride? Desperation? Or was she just so used to manipulating people that she didn't know how to be honest anymore? After weeks of drama, lies, and family turmoil, I was done. Done with the constant back and forth, done with being guilt-tripped, and done with letting my sister's manipulations control my life. It was time to take charge and set boundaries, not just with her, but with my entire family. I reached out to my parents again. I knew they were stuck in the middle, trying to mediate and keep the peace, but their constant pressure to fix things was draining me. I called them separately to make my stance clear. When I spoke to my mom, I told her straight up, "I love you, but this situation with my sister is toxic. I've explained my side and done more than enough to offer help directly for my niece. But now we know she lied about the medical bills. I can't get involved anymore, and I need you to respect my decision and stop pushing me to change my mind." She sighed heavily, and I thought she might argue, but she surprised me. "I understand, honey," she said quietly. "I just hate seeing family like this." "I do too," I admitted. "But this isn't on me. My sister created this situation when she lied to everyone. She needs to own up to her actions. I can't fix this for her, and I won't be dragged into it anymore." My dad was harder to convince. "Family is family," he said firmly. "You don't turn your back on them, no matter what." "Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, I didn't turn my back on her. She turned her back on all of us when she lied and manipulated to make herself look like the victim. You saw the proof from the hospital. There was no treatment scheduled for my niece. She made it all up. Now she's trying to guilt me into cleaning up her mess. That's not what family is supposed to do. He didn't say much after that. I could tell he was mulling it over. I knew he wouldn't fully agree with me, but at least I'd said my piece. I made the decision to block my sister's number. It felt extreme, but every interaction with her had been toxic, and I needed space to heal. Before blocking her, I sent one last message. I love my niece, and I'll always be here for her if she truly needs me. But I can't continue this back and forth. It's unhealthy for both of us. I hope one day we can rebuild our relationship, but for now, I need space. Please respect that. She didn't reply before I blocked her. Honestly, I didn't expect her to. I knew this wouldn't be the end of her attempts to stir up drama, but at least I'd taken a step toward protecting my peace. With those boundaries in place, I finally felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. I had a moment to reflect on everything that had happened, the anger, the hurt, the constant questioning of whether I'd done the right thing. It had all taken a toll on me. I still couldn't shake the guilt about my niece. She was the only person in this mess who truly didn't deserve any of it. I decided to send her a care package, nothing too extravagant, just a few toys and books that I knew she'd love. I included a handwritten note. I love you so much, and I'm always here for you. Hope you enjoy these gifts. Love, Auntie. I sent it through my parents to avoid direct contact with my sister. They promised to pass it along. As weeks turned to months, I heard less and less about my sister. My parents stopped bringing her up, and the group chat quieted down. I didn't know if she'd moved on or was just plotting her next move, but either way, I didn't care anymore. I was done letting her take up space in my head. One unexpected silver lining, though, was the support I received from some of my cousins. After my message in the group chat, a few of them reached out privately. They said they admired how I handled everything. One cousin even said, "I've always felt your sister acted entitled, but no one ever called her out. Good for you for standing your ground." Hearing that meant more than I can say. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, even if it sometimes felt that way. Eventually, I reached a point where I could think about my sister without feeling a knot of anger in my stomach. I still didn't trust her, and I doubted I ever would, but I didn't feel consumed by the situation anymore. I found peace, not because the situation was resolved, but because I'd made the choice to prioritize my own well-being. As for my sister, who knows what the future holds? Maybe one day we'll find a way to rebuild our relationship, but for now, I'm okay keeping my distance. Life is too short to spend it tangled up in someone else's toxicity. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that peace is priceless. I'm not willing to sacrifice it for anyone, not even family. The moment I finally stood up for myself was transformative. Despite all the family drama, I'm in a much better place now, both financially and emotionally, than I was during those dark days when I first reached out to my sister for help. Finding inner peace matters more than keeping toxic relationships, even with family members. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are with the people closest to us, but they're often the most important ones. I no longer feel guilty about putting my own well-being first. My relationship with my parents has actually improved since I set clear boundaries. They've become more respectful of my decisions, and we've been able to rebuild some of the trust that was damaged during this ordeal. And despite everything, I still find ways to be present in my niece's life, even if it means navigating carefully around my sister. Looking back on this journey, from being broke and desperate to finding stability and strength, I realize how much I've grown. The person who called my sister crying 2 years ago isn't the same person who finally stood her ground and refused to be manipulated. I'm proud of that growth, even though it came through painful experiences. So that's my story. I never expected that financial hardship would reveal so much about my family dynamics, but I'm grateful for the clarity it brought, even if the truth was difficult to accept. Sometimes life's biggest lessons come from the people and situations that hurt us the most. Thanks for reading my story. I know it was long, but it felt good to share this with people who might understand or have been through something similar. Has anyone else had to deal with toxic family members who only reach out when they need something?